I'm very excited for this conversation because you're like one of the OGs in my own process for me to lift the veil. And I think your story was one of the first that I heard that really made me think differently about traditional medicine, about pharmaceuticals, about illness, about disease. So I'm thrilled to have this conversation with you and tell your story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for having me, Lana. I'm so excited to be here.
Why don't we start with yeah, tell us a little bit about your background in traditional medicine, what you went through that sort of segued you into the holistic world and what you do now.
So, my name's Logan Trudell. I am a registered nurse. I grew up in California. I ended up going to nursing schools in Northern California. I went to originally Sierra College and then American River, and then I got my bachelor's of nursing in Sac State. I originally worked as an ICU nurse. I started in Northern California, and I transitioned from like a small hospital to a intensive care unit. And my story kind of starts when I was 5 years old. So when I was
Mm,
five, that was my real beginning of medicine. And that was when I saw medicine for the first time, because when I was 5 years old, I developed eczema and I also had warts all over my arms. And when that happened, my mom, of course, takes me to the doctor. They give me the creams and we're on our way. And that's what we
mm,
used. When I was growing up, I got into water polo, and that actually seemed to mitigate a lot of my symptoms, and I didn't need to use the creams as much. Every now and again, I would sometimes have eczema come up, like in this area, and I would just put the creams on it, and I'd be on my way. When I became a nurse, what ended up happening was I started to see a small amount of the eczema start to come back on my
mm,
arms and under my eyebrows, and I didn't really think anything of it. So I'm working as a nurse and I'm developing disease at the same time. I'm like,
mm,
oh, everything will be taken care of. I'm surrounded by experts. I'm surrounded by all these people who have been in medicine way longer than I've even been alive. Some people in it for 40 years. And I start asking them questions. Hey, I have eczema. What can I do about it? Oh, throw this extra cream at it. And along my journey, it was a very long journey, but along my journey, I started to become disenchanted with the career I got into, because I got into nursing to take care of people who were in a worse position than I was in.
mm.
And what I started to find was I actually became a part of that system. I got very sick myself. No one that I worked with had any answers. And I'm like, well, this isn't really healing. And so there were many moments where I was working in this very matrixy system with these fluorescent lights and these alarms buzzing everywhere. And I would just felt so out of place. And like my soul was screaming at me.
Mm.
And I truly believe I manifested the disease because I was so out of alignment. But the cool thing was that disease pushed me into my life's highest calling and purpose, which is actually helping people heal naturally
Mm.
without all the drugs. So what ended up happening is um, I quit, moved abroad to Colombia, and ended up going all down the plant medicine route. Spent like
Mhm.
8 months to a year just going in on ayahuasca, bufo, all the ceremonies.
Yeah.
And I put pieces together of all these different things from Eastern philosophy and also the things that do work from Western medicine. I'm not here to completely trash Western medicine. It's
Yeah.
very beneficial, especially in trauma medicine. Um,
Yeah. Emergency medicine
but
too.
yeah, like my path was going from Western medicine and then going the ancestral route, and realizing there's a lot of things with plants that we completely lost and we put on the shelves and buried,
Mhm.
and blending those two worlds together is what actually can help people the most.
Um, okay, so during your time in traditional medicine, when you started developing eczema and you were looking for the solution, what was the guidance that they were offering you in terms of like what was the cause of eczema? What was the
Yeah,
suggestion to heal it?
yeah. So from 5 years old to every pretty much traditional Western specialist I went to, they would say it was genetic. I started asking questions. I've always been good at asking questions. I'm like, okay, well, no one in my family has it. My grandpa had
Mm.
eczema, but he had celiacs and he was eating pizza. So it's like,
Yeah.
I could figure that out. Like, okay, well, if he's eating bad, he's probably going to have issues. So they told me it's genetic, but they don't want to do DNA testing. Then I start asking questions like, can I get allergy tests done? And then they're telling me, well, it has nothing to do with food. And I'm just kind of shocked because the medical system, especially for doctors, it's based off of the Hippocratic Oath. The Hippocratic Oath comes from Hippocrates, who said, let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food. And so doctors were telling me that food had nothing to do with my disease. And I'm like, just asking these really simple questions that have deep truths to them. And every person I went to, I would get closer and closer to another person with other answers. So it started with just traditional doctors. Then they pushed me on to dermatologists.
Mm-hmm.
Those dermatologists just pretty much pushed me onto the creams. And then I had to use my degree and really advocate for myself and say, can you send me to an allergy specialist? And they're like, no, because it's not an allergy. It has nothing to do with food. And I just really pushed. They sent me to an allergy specialist. I talked to that guy and he's like, well, these results are like 50% inconclusive. So if it says you're allergic to eggs, it's a coin flip of if it's right or not. So then I'm like, okay, well, what's the point of that testing anyway? And then at that point, I hit the end of the road with the traditional system. So if you're in the US and you pay for medical insurance, you are paying them every month. And if you're a healthy person, you're paying them every month for essentially nothing. Of course, if something happens, you have that covered. But something was happening to me and they were not extending any more care because they have a very strict fence around what they can do. So I decided to go to a functional medicine practitioner like 2 hours away from me. And I have to pay out of pocket thousands of dollars because while I'm still paying insurance. I work with her for about 2 months and she had me like on green smoothies and supplements and all this stuff. And she ended up firing me because my case was so complex. What she didn't know at that time was my symptoms had changed from the original presentation that I had on my face, down my chest, down my back, even down my legs. It started changing with her to like hives and it got itchier. What she didn't know at that time was I was actually having detox reactions and it was moving in the right direction.
Mm.
So
Why
she
didn't she
fires
know
me.
that?
What's that?
Why didn't she know that?
She had not had enough cases, I don't think. Yeah. Yeah. And not enough trust in herself as well. Like a lot of people with the process, they can get sucked into the person's disease, right? So I was in a very deep frequency of fear. That's what happens when you get sick. Like you can get consumed by it when you feel that bad all the time.
Yeah.
And a really good practitioner is able to continue to hold space for that person without falling into the fear of not getting them results. So if she just was able to sit in the pocket a little longer, we probably could have done better.
Yeah.
And then I went to like an NAT practitioner, which they have vials and they do muscle testing on you to see.
Mm.
So every single person I went to, they'd give me a test based on what kind of allergen I might have. And all the results were different. So then I'm trying to piecemeal what actually works. I'm doing all these elimination diets. And while I'm doing elimination diets, my body's changing. And I don't know if it's changing for the better or for the worse. So it was a very long journey.
Yeah. And when you left traditional medicine, did you leave because you felt like you had a disease that was not able to be cured, or did you leave because you were seeing that pattern with other people as well?
I left because I knew the profession I was in was not true to what my values were. My
Why?
values my values related to going into healthcare and nursing were to help people. I saw that the majority of the patients we took care of, they'd be diabetic, type 2 diabetes. We know that this can be treated if you make lifestyle changes. We're giving them jello. We're giving them
Yeah.
uh, pasteurized dairy. We're giving them seed oil ridden food. And so it was just like that. and a million other things that I saw in the system where it's like, this isn't real healing.
Do you think that they're aware? So, like the doctors, the surgeons, the practitioners, like, are they aware that they are contributing to the problem, or do you think it's a matter of being brainwashed? I guess it's, or are they aware and they don't care to investigate?
I like to now think that everyone's trying their best and everyone has the
Yeah,
best intentions. So we start there, right? I do believe that a lot of people are indoctrinated
yeah,
into a system. So the first day I show up to nursing school, we have to buy $350 worth of textbooks on pharmaceuticals, and we have a pop quiz the next day, and we have to know 50 of them.
hmm,
The majority of nursing school is related to pharmacology. And for a doctor, it's even more so. And
yeah,
so if you start looking deeper and deeper into how the system works, and like you go deep down the rabbit hole of uh, how it wasn't Carnegie, Rockefeller, the Rockefeller Institution, um, and just how the system works, then you can start to see beyond the veil. But I do believe like there are a lot of doctors who are helping people, and
yeah,
I worked in the trauma ICU. We did help a lot of people because when you're running a machine like that and you're trying to keep people alive, it's there's a lot of spinning plates, and in an industry that big, at the end of the day, it is a business. So you do lose a lot of the humanity when you're running a business, and this is what I think a lot of doctors and even my colleagues, there's almost like an unwritten rule of this energy in the hospital of like everyone being extremely stressed out and pretty much everyone knowing that a lot of the stuff that's going on is bullshit.
yeah,
And there's this angst in the hospital all the time. But it's very
yeah,
hard because there's sunk cost fallacy. So like I mean, before COVID, nobody quit the profession. After COVID, a lot of people quit,
yeah,
but before COVID, no one quit the profession because you put 10, 15 years into a career, you put 10 years into studying,
yeah,
and you find out that what you're doing may not be as ideal and you're still making a lot of money. Well, I'm just going to keep saving my money and then maybe I'll retire.
yeah,
But what happens is a lot of the people in the system, like I had a lot of morbidly obese coworkers. Like people just they get sucked into the system of constantly giving themselves to care for other people, and then they end up getting sick. And what the system does, it doesn't matter if it's a nurse or if it's a regular civilian because they're still getting paid. So when I
yeah,
got sick, I got sucked into the system,
yeah.
and I was still paying.
So then what ended up healing your eczema?
Me. And I say that because with people I work with now, there is no one thing that heals you.
Yeah,
Most people, like obviously there's protocols and there's things you can do, and there you can detox your body, and you can
yeah,
practice more mindfulness, and you can remove yourself from a stressful environment. I had so many factors at play. All I can tell you is one, the biggest thing for me was leaky gut. So that's an issue for a lot of people. Um, Changing the food I was eating, changing my relationship with food, becoming more mindful, having a meditation practice, quitting my hyper stressful job that was super misaligned.
hmm,
The thing that a lot of people don't know is we have these core archetypes, Jungian archetypes. So, for example, I'm an outlaw, I'm a creator, and I'm a magician, or I'm an adventurer and a magician. None of those things align with nursing. Can't be an outlaw because it's bureaucratic. Can't adventure really. And then magician is inciting change in other people. Very hard to do as a nurse. So that's huge for a lot of people when it comes to their purpose. Like if you don't have purpose in your life, it's a quick way to get sicker.
yeah,
And ultimately, I felt a lot of the reason I got sick too was like I was living a reality that I was sold based off of what my parents wanted me to do, what society wanted me to do, and I went down that route. And I was making great money as a 25, 26-year-old. I was making 140,000 a year, and I was miserable just because I bought into somebody else's narrative.
Yeah.
But I am very blessed to have to go down that route because I can see both sides now.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm definitely gonna have to find a way to put up pictures because I think when we're talking about eczema, some people think like, oh, just like your entire body was covered. Like
Yeah.
it it's probably the worst case I've ever seen with my like, my own two eyes in a photo.
Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
yeah, I think that what I always talk about and what I see with clients when they're coming to heal either physical or mental illness is it's like you said, it's a combination of things. And that's why I started a service to connect people to a combination of things. I feel like the root a lot of the time is the toxins in the environment, in the foods that have been getting worse and worse through the years, and trauma or repressed emotions in the body. And I know your story, but when I read your story recently in more depth, hearing about the things you dealt with in childhood and some of those traumas that had attributed to your illness of eczema, can you touch a little bit more on that journey and that part of the healing and how that contributed to the healing of your eczema?
Yeah. Yeah. I think when I look back at my childhood, because I've had to like research everything I went through to understand it
Mhm.
fully.
Yeah.
And something that I saw was what, like around the time I was 5, there was a lot of fighting going on in my house. And there was a lot of periods where I'd be in my bedroom by myself crying and like not getting the love that I needed and not really having somebody to say, "Oh yeah, it's going to be okay." And so
Yeah.
I think there's a huge spiritual component and emotional component to disease that is completely missed in the Western world. And this is what got me into so much like esoteric and Eastern
Mhm.
philosophy and principles, because I think it's an area that they've really gotten right. And that's the area of like when I was a kid and all these emotions were coming up, what happens? Like I could cry, but if I didn't have anybody to really help me go through them and say I'm going to be okay, well, now that gets stuck in the body, and then that becomes ridiculous fear. And so a lot of my childhood was walking on eggshells in my house, worried about a certain parent acting a certain way. I could act the same way every single day. I could have a smile on my face every single day, be a really good boy, and one of those days I could still get in trouble or screamed at. So that can create neuroses and develop into issues in the future. But what matters most is not what my parents did and if they're a good guy or bad guy. What matters most is how I perceived it.
Yeah.
So if I perceived it in a light that I didn't like at that time and I didn't know how to excrete those emotions, then they become suppressed and repressed, and they're stuck in the body until we decide to move them. And what usually will happen is we'll find out later on in our life that we've got all these blocks and we can't figure out why.
Hmm.
And then we got to do this deep work that's super painful, and we got to feel
Yeah.
it.
I think that this is a big piece of what's missed in traditional medicine. And again, not to knock traditional medicine, because I think, I always say if I break my leg tomorrow, I'm not hitting up my functional medicine practitioner. Like if I get in a car accident, I'm going to a surgeon and they're gonna save my limb, and I think we get to honor that and honor what their strength is. And then we also get to have the conversation of, yeah, where there's a hole and where holistic medicine is really more to better the well and make sure we aren't getting sick with disease.
Yeah.
I feel like we're in a time of a true revolution where there's a lot of us speaking up about this. And yeah, just coming from a lens of how do we get people to see that whether it's been a lie or just new information or really old information resurface, because these holistic modalities have been around for centuries and centuries, I think we've just been disconnected from this information. So I think, yeah, I think the traumas and the emotions paired with the toxins is really what's missed in that world. And I think it might be changing, but I don't
Well,
know. Do you feel?
if you look at the rates of autoimmune conditions now, just from the 50s, it's astronomically higher.
Yeah.
And like I'm beginning to believe that eczema and a lot of skin disease now is becoming an autoimmune issue. And there's so many issues that I see all the time with clients related to the immune system is just completely hijacked now.
Yeah. Okay, so you work with clients now
Yeah.
and to achieve holistic health, right? Without the use of pharmaceuticals and medicine, which is amazing. And what is the first thing you do when someone comes to you with skin issues? What are you checking? What's your protocol? Like, what are you recommending?
Yeah, I for me, everything is about more so personalization.
Hmm.
So obviously, like the world is very cookie cutter in a lot of ways, and cookie cutter works for mass populations. But for someone that I'm doing like real in-depth work with, I want to see everything. I want to see how they grew up, what their emotions are like, what their
Hmm.
relationships are like with their family, what their habits and routines are, all the testing that they've done before, all the different practitioners they've been to, um, how stressful their life is, what kind of toxins they've been exposed to before. Do they have amalgam fillings in their teeth? Do they have thyroid issues? Just a long list of things.
Yeah.
Um, and then from there, like really getting them the right modalities that work for their body. Because at the end of the day, like I tried so many different diets, and I know the truth now is that all the diet fads that are out there, they're all fads. Like
Yeah.
ketogenic diet works, carnivore works, vegan diet works, veganism, vegetarianism. They all work for certain people at certain times, but people get sucked into an identity of I'm gonna be a vegan the rest of my life. But it's like
Yeah.
you don't have to do that.
Mhm.
Um, so really teaching people how to become more intuitive with their body and know what they need. But that does usually start with if someone has a bunch of rashes all over their skin and they're coming off of steroid creams and all that, then we have to detox the body. That absolutely
Yeah.
has to. Yeah.
So when you came out of traditional medicine, right? You went to functional medicine first, and then you went to the ancestral medicines, ayahuasca, bufo, psilocybin. Yeah.
Yeah.
In that world, what do you think was helpful for you in your healing process, and what do you think you learned from the time dabbling in the ancestral medicines?
Yeah, I think there was a significant period of spining up for me that happened. I think plant medicine really showed me that I was being a victim.
Mhm.
That was just a massive spotlight, and it took a lot of ceremonies for me to get to that point.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing, it showed me I was a warrior. It showed me how much like soul and spirit and heart I had because I was going through. I've seen people at plant ceremonies, and there's never a there should never be a comparison, but there'd be times where I'd be on my fifth, sixth, 15th ceremony, and I'm like, how are people just laying around not making any noises? I was every single ceremony for me was like the darkest thing, and it was just like going straight to hell and sitting there. And for me, that's what I needed. And because I was able to go to such dark places, now I can go and sit in very light places. So
Mm.
all of that taught me a lot. If people want to know more about my story with my plant medicine journey, I got involved in kind of a culty operation, and all of that really came from me outsourcing my power. So I think the
Yeah.
biggest thing that I learned about the plant medicine realm and being in that culty situation is when you're trying to heal yourself, you have to become the CEO. So the CEO hires consultants. So when I went and started drinking ayahuasca, I wasn't looking at it that way. I was looking at it as someone who had the magic solution and the potion that was going to save me.
Totally.
And that sucked me into being able to become a victim of somebody who didn't have the same agenda that I had. And
Totally.
so after all the plant medicine stuff and after I got out of that situation, I went home and I had all these creams that I was holding on to. I wasn't using them anymore because I knew they weren't working, but I was holding on to them. It was like, oh, if it doesn't work, I'll have a backup plan. I just grabbed them, threw them down the chute, never looked back. And after that, like within a month, I healed completely.
So crazy. I remember, and same, right? When I started on the path of like all this stuff, you just look to people for the answers that look like they have them, but we're all on such different paths and we all have like the answers within for ourselves. We can only, you know, help guide people with the information we have with
Yeah.
how we've maneuvered with ourselves. And I think that's such an important part because all of these things are tools, right? A big reason I started again, concierge is like, yes, there's plant medicine. Yes, there's functional medicine. Yes, there's traditional medicine. Yes, there's meditation, breath work, coaching, but they're just tools. And if
Yeah.
we give ayahuasca the power, if we give the functional medicine the power, if we give the doctors the power, my mom always says like, I just want the doctor to save me and fix me, you know? And um, I always say to her, like, we have to save ourselves. And yeah, I think we can get lost in the sauce of these modalities. And the best place to come from is really understanding that they're just tools.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think also I have a newfound lens on illness and sickness when I've been dealing with like chronic gut issues and things like that. And I have, I witness other people that are sick with things like cancer, extreme skin issues, or autoimmune. And now I sort of look at these people that go through these things as like they're really special. Like they've been chosen for some kind of mission. I think when we look at it like that, we're like, okay, what is this here to teach me? Then we can start to really listen to like the wisdom that's behind the illness. And I think that's something that I hope traditional medicine starts to teach is there's something here for you. You're experiencing this for a reason, not as if you're broken because you're experiencing illness,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. There's a question I always ask people if they want to work with me, and it's, why do you think you have this?
Mm,
It's a very powerful question. And also, what do you think it is? Because they come to me and they're like, they expect me to have all the answers, but I want to see how tapped in they are to their own intuition. And a lot of times they're pretty accurate with some of the stuff. Like, oh yeah, I'm like, I really hate my job. It's like, yeah, okay, so you're sick and you have this rare condition, and we can attribute it to all these other factors, but this is probably really the root, and let's start working on that.
yeah.
And that's what happens when people start changing their body. What ends up happening is they really get aligned, and that's what holistic wellness is. It's
Mm,
aligning all of it, not
yeah.
just, oh yeah, I'm going to patch myself up, fix my skin disease, and go back into nursing. If that happened, I wouldn't be an author. I wouldn't have a YouTube channel. I wouldn't have a business. I'd
Yeah.
just be doing the same thing the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. I think also having the clinical background and being able to have the holistic background now is really comforting for people, at least with people who come to concierge. There is a credibility factor when someone knows their doctor, they were a nurse, or they were physical therapist, chiropractor even. And
Yeah.
so a lot of the people I work with have both backgrounds, and because again, I think there's benefits to both. But what I hear from a lot of people that were trained in traditional medicine was the emphasis was on pharmacology and diagnosing medication and surgery. So I think they just have a different toolbox, and holistic practitioners have a different toolbox. And how do we bridge the gap and work together is really what I'm trying to do. I think what we're all trying to do on this mission.
Yeah.
But with your old colleagues, like the people that you used to work with, are they curious what you're up to? Do they receive like this new lens you have on the system, or is it kind of like this guy's gotten off the rails?
There is not there are maybe two people that I've had Facebook conversations with that I used to work with. I had a lot of friends when I worked in the trauma ICU. Like I didn't necessarily hang out with all of them. They were all much older than me, but they were all like, yeah, it was relatively like a family in a way. But yeah, when I decided to leave, I had so many people that it was so foreign to me based off my expectations of how people were going to respond. I
Mm,
put in my 2 weeks notice. The next day, the word was out, and every day I walked into work, I'd have 4 or 5 people asking me, "Oh, you're moving to where are you moving?" Columbia. Oh, like South Carolina? No, the country. How long are you going to be there for? Are you coming back? No, I'm not coming back. Okay, well, you're going to work at a hospital there. No, I'm quitting. Well, you can't do that. You're throwing your life away. This is like 80% of my coworkers. And like I could see on their faces their reactions because essentially I didn't know this at the time and it was really hard on me. But they were just projecting their own insecurities about like, oh, if this guy can leave and quit, like he's going to completely throw his life away because that's what they think would happen to them. And so I
yeah,
went through it and I had like maybe 5 people that I was coworkers with who were really excited for me. They're so happy. And most of the other people uh, were just shocked. They thought I was throwing my life away. And I've talked to maybe a couple of them, but yeah, I think it's very confronting to see the life I'm living now.
hmm,
Because if I did it, that would mean if somebody wants to leave, they could do it too. And
yeah,
if they fully embrace that, that means they have to go against everything that they did before. But that's not the truth. The truth is like we can spend 30 years invested in one thing and we can completely switch, and those 30 years could have built us into being the person that we needed to be in order to be that new person. But I think a lot of
yeah,
people get so attached with their identity, and this is why my company is called Skin Savers, is because with skin disease or with any identity, you have to shed it. Like the
yeah,
snake sheds its skin to remove parasites. We have to shed our skin to remove the old part of ourselves. If we shed our skin and we're the same thing, then we're going against the laws of nature.
yeah. Do you see the same thing, whether it's acne, psoriasis, or eczema?
Yeah, acne is very much related to the liver,
Yeah.
and for a lot of people, it's liver and dairy issues. But yeah, psoriasis, rosacea,
Mhm.
acne, eczema, a lot of it has to do with gut, liver, and then obviously all the other things we talked about that are
Yeah.
the psycho emotional components for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely know the acne journey very well. Do you think there's a way that somebody knowing this information, do you think they could still work in that system and maybe like bring light to it and really try to bring these holistic practices in? Or do you think it's so impossible to do while working in that way, in that
Well,
system?
I tried doing this in some aspect, and obviously, I'm not here to say that nothing would ever work. But I tried a company. My first business ever when I first moved to Columbia was called Healthcare Stress Relief, and so I was helping healthcare practitioners use mindfulness practices to pretty much avoid burnout. But it was funny because it was like trying to pour water into a bucket that had a bunch of holes in it. It's like, oh, why is it not working? It's really hard to help people out of a system that is like just going to burn them out. Like you can't teach mindfulness practices to people who are burnt out all the time. It's just not going to work.
Yeah.
Um, so no, I don't think anyone is like doomed or cannot bring change to the system. plenty of accounts of people that are making big changes. I think most of the change makers when it comes to the Western model and just healing in general are kind of stepping out and doing their own thing. And
They are. Yeah.
we see this in a lot, like a lot of people will go more into the functional medicine route. Like I've gone
Yeah.
more into like the detox in the coaching space.
Yeah.
So
Like Casey Means has been speaking out, and I mean, Casey's a former surgeon.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and I think there's so many people now, and we have the internet, which is
Hmm.
great because now people can really see the truth, and
Yeah.
there's a huge shift in consciousness. Like when I was going through all of this, there were accounts on TikTok and Instagram that were showing you how to heal certain conditions and telling you all these things. And like, there's a lot of information to sift through, but that stuff didn't exist. People weren't talking about gut health. I'd have to find like very hidden books on gut health when I first started going down the rabbit hole. And so
Yeah.
now it's like people are waking up. Yeah.
Yeah. They definitely are. I feel my news feed personally is like every other day it's a doctor saying he gave up his license, or
Yeah.
yeah. And I know on one hand I feel like I everyone's already in these conversations, and on another I go back home to Jersey where I'm from, which is still like a pretty like hip area, and people are like, "What's seed oils?" And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh. In my mind, everybody's like so in tune to it,
Yeah.
and there are so many people who are, but there are still so many people that are like are not, and so it's very interesting. It's very interesting times.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard because when you start developing a new level of consciousness, you kind of isolate and can put yourself into a bubble.
Yeah,
And it's very much it's a hero's journey of like go out into the world, figure it out for your own, and then come back and teach it to others.
yeah,
And then there is a huge transition period of learning how to kind of talk to people in a way
mhm,
in which they can actually resonate with it, because
yeah,
you have to go to a different level and then you have to go to a different level to then educate. So um,
yeah,
it's difficult. It requires a lot of patience, but I think it's what society needs the most.
yeah. So much of what I do now is meet people where they're at and try to decipher like there's levels to health, there's levels to consciousness, there's levels to spirituality, there's levels to willingness, there's levels to see underneath the veil. And I think most of my sessions are just trying to gauge where someone at, not to overwhelm them with information if they were even to believe the information, but also just to like, yeah, see where they're at, and who would be the best fit for them based on that, those levels.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, I don't know. I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and she was just saying it's not that she doesn't care about the information, it's just not affecting her right now because her and her children aren't sick. So I
Yeah.
think that's the other thing I've really realized is people are only interested when they're either physically or mentally ill.
Yep.
I spent my 20s partying and drinking and like eating all the things and doing whatever I wanted, but it wasn't until I like mentally was going through stuff that I got interested. So I think that's the other thing is like I'm always trying to figure out how to articulate to the people to get ahead of that, but it seems to be that people are only interested once they're really affected
Yeah.
by ill.
You don't actually articulate it because it starts to get into like a savior complex. I struggled with this a lot, and it's just okay. It sounds like you might need to experience a little more pain before we
Yeah.
make a decision. And that's actually the most loving place. It's like, yeah, you
Yeah.
need a little more pain. And that's what happened to me. Like I was getting signs and I wanted to make a change in my life and I didn't. I kept waiting. And then it starts as a poke, a push, a slap, a punch. And
Yeah.
people wait till the punch.
I totally did.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, I think this is super helpful. I think people with skin issues in general, I think it's so isolating. It's so debilitating. I remember when I had acne, I just felt like everybody, I just felt so ugly. I felt like just not myself. And people live with these conditions for so long, and there's so much hope for them if they're
Yeah.
willing to see outside of the traditional systems. And if the traditional system is working for you, great. But if not, there are plenty of options within this realm of holistic health, of health beyond pharmaceuticals and band-aid solutions and quick fixes. So yeah, if anyone is watching this that is going through that, there's hope, and reach out to myself or to Logan, and we'll connect you with the modalities that will really heal from the inside, not just temporarily.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Lana.